Welcome to Try Not to Overthink It, where we explore the intricate landscape of mental health, well-being, and everyday life. I'm RJ.
I'm Khalil.
Join us as we dive into insightful conversations, share expert perspectives, and personal stories that shed light on the various dimensions of mental wellness. Whether you're seeking guidance, inspiration, or deeper understanding of the human mind, this podcast is your safe space to learn and navigate the journey to a happier, healthier self. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification button so that you don't miss out on any of the content that we talk about. So today we are going to talk about toxic relationships. For a lot of us, especially, we will be in relationships with people and don't realize that the relationship is not fruitful and is not one centered in growth and elevation. And so, as I said on previous episodes, if things do not add and multiply in your life, they are subtracting, dividing out of them. And for a lot of us, we will stay in relationships that do not serve us. And I talked about this in a Mindfulness Minute on the TikTok. So if you haven't heard it, you need to go over to the TikTok. The link will be down in the description. If relationships do not serve you and do not push you to be the best version of yourself, they are slowly draining you and they are slowly killing you, rather that be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically. So I thought it was important for us to kind of talk about that topic today and, just kind of unpack that topic. What do you think, Khalil?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this topic up today because, there's so many social media podcasts where people make a living off of this, talking about toxic relationships and talking about how to know if you're in one or how to escape one, right? So this is a hot topic, but one of the issues as being a clinician is that when we define a toxic relationship, we have to look at it from several points of view. One of the main things that I explain to my clients, right? Just because someone isn't doing what you want them to do doesn't mean the relationship is toxic, right? You know, we've got to look at things from a person-centered belief sometimes, right? Because everybody is self-centered to a point, right? We think about ourselves. And then there's some people that don't think about themselves enough, right? But most people are self-centered enough where they're focusing on their feelings and how the relationship might impact their feelings or emotions, right? That's normal. Well, the problem is, right, when someone doesn't do what I ask them to do, right, that doesn't mean that automatically that should be an argument, that should be a fight. We've got to look at ourselves. What am I asking them to do? Am I asking them for general respect? Because if I'm their partner, they should respect me. I should, when people talk about, we don't want to just expect our partners to do everything we say. No, respect is something that should be developed over time, right? You meet someone out of a mutual respect, we're starting to date, right? I should respect certain boundaries of yours. I should respect how I talk to you. Those things should be expected, right? As another human being to another human being. If my partner is talking down to me, they're belittling me, right? Then we start going into some disrespect, and then we start borderlining toxic, right? The reason why it would be toxic is if I chose to stay in a relationship where someone was not giving me respect, and because I wanted a relationship so bad, I was willing to take that behavior just because I didn't want to be alone. Then we start talking about something that's toxic, right? People who manipulate your emotions, they refuse to take blame, right? And they're making everything your fault, and then they gaslight you, and they do all those things, right? And when I accept that behavior, right, because like I said, I don't want to be alone. I'm fearful of losing my partner. I'm gonna, I put up with this behavior, right? Because I decided to stay in it, it becomes toxic. Right. And it's toxic for me. Technically, the other person's getting whatever they want out of the relationship.
Yeah.
And then we have to look about allowing other people to dictate my feelings. Right. And that goes into the same manipulation concept. Right. Where my partner's behavior or their reaction to a problem, right, dictates what I'm going to do, right? Because regardless of whatever's going on, I usually have to keep a level head, and I need to be objective of what and look, of course I have my partner's back, but I can't allow them to dictate and speak for me and speak for my feelings, because you should have some level of differentiation on how you feel depending on the event or the circumstance, right? And then also, one of the other parts of a toxic relationship I was going to talk about is not allowing someone to have identity outside the relationship, right? I need to be able to have my own friends, all right? I need to be able to stay in contact with my family members, right? You can't isolate me, right? And notice all these things I've named, right? We stay in relationships like that because we're fearful of losing someone. That's when it becomes toxic.
Well, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, right? I think that it's important to understand what a toxic relationship is. Because, like, in today's culture, we want to label everything that does not align with my worldview as toxic. You're
Right.
either toxic or what is the word that they misogynist.
Misogynist, right?
You know, because you're not just co-signing everything that I say. There's a difference between, and I tell my clients this all the time. There's a difference between someone providing you constructive criticism versus someone being a hater. Someone who's providing you constructive criticism, they're not the same thing. They both may not be what you want to hear. One is not what you want to hear, but you need to hear it. Whereas the other one is something that you don't want to hear, but you also don't need to hear it. So right. Constructive criticism on one hand is someone telling you that your idea is bad, but telling you where you can improve and be better.
Yes.
Whereas someone who is hating is telling you your idea is bad, but then not providing you any type of direction and making it better. Those are two entirely different things. But we live in a day and age where people want to assign these labels to people and to things that don't align with my worldview. If you disagree with me in any way, regardless if that's respectfully or you just agree to disagree with me, it becomes one of those things where you're a misogynist or you're toxic. No, it's not toxic. We have to assign, because words have power and words have meaning. So we have to assign the proper name to the proper term. So when you are in a toxic relationship, it is one that consistently harms your well-being.
Right.
Rather that be mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. Instead of providing you support, love, and respect, a toxic relationship is filled with negativity, control, and unhealthy patterns.
Yes.
For a lot of us, what we tend to do is, like Khalil was saying, we will stay in situations that don't serve us, that don't push us to be better. Because sometimes, it's like going to the gym. Nobody wants to go to the gym. It hurts. It sucks. It's uncomfortable. I gotta be in there for a long period of time. My body hurts, this, that, and the third. But at the end of the day, your body needs that, though.
Yep.
So, but what we will tend to do is, we as human beings, we are creatures of habit. We do what's comfortable for us. We do what we know. And so I will stay in a relationship that is not fruitful, where we're fighting, we're bickering, we're at each other's throats all the time, because I'm comfortable. I know this person. This is my person. We will find ourselves making excuses to stay with this person, rather than recognize that I'm depressed, I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm in constantly fighting all the time when I'm with this person. And that's the difference between being in a normal relationship versus being in a toxic one. When you are in a normal relationship, there's a level of respect that's shown you. There's a level of dedication and, unconditional positive regard that's shown you, where you guys may not agree all the time. You may not like each other all the time, but if push came to shove, your person is going to support you and whatever it is that you're trying to do. Right. They're going to pour into you. They're going to take from their cup and pour into your cup. They're going to be there when things are at their worst, not just when they are at their best. Whereas someone who is who is toxic is going to do the exact opposite. Everything that I laid out in as part of a normal relationship are, as I've laid out in previous episodes, basic principle of math. You can solve any huge math problem with 4 things: addition, multiplication, division, subtraction. 2 of those increase, whereas 2 of those decrease and take away. Right. So when you are in a healthy relationship, a normal relationship, there's addition and multiplication that
Multiplication, right?
occurs in your life, the quality of your life. Whereas when you are in a toxic relationship, there is division and subtraction that occurs out of your life in regards to the quality of your life. Rather that be friends, rather that be family members, rather that be opportunities, rather that be hell. In some situations, you see some people lose their lives altogether.
Right.
They cease to be alive. So when you are, there are some telltale signs that you need to recognize, like they're red flags. They're red flags. And it came to me when, you know, like listening to Risa Tisa. Like I only needed to watch like part of the very first episode to recognize this was going to be a hot mess. It was going to be a train wreck.
Yeah, I watched it for a little
She,
too long. We talked about that. I wish I had turned it off after the first 10 minutes.
yeah, I mean, she alluded in the first episode that there were red flags that she saw, but she chose to
Red
ignore
flag.
them. There,
Right.
certain things that there are certain things that you have to look at. Certain signs. Constant criticism or belittling,
Mm-hmm.
manipulation or emotional blackmail.
Right.
Khalil alluded to the controlling behavior,
Mm-hmm.
a lack of trust and constant dishonesty, where the
Right.
person's always lying or trying to circumvent or shuck the truth. And then another one is walking on eggshells, where you feel anxious or you feel like at the slightest thing the whole house of cards is just going to fall apart.
Right.
Like things are just the world is going to shatter when you're engaging and talking and interacting with this person. That is
Right.
how you know that you are in the wrong type of relationship. But as Khalil alluded to, we will stay in certain relationships because it's comfortable for us. It's what I know. It's
That's
what
what
I'm
I'm used
used
to.
to. And most importantly, and I talked about this in the Mindfulness Minute, some of us think that we don't deserve better.
Yeah.
And
My
I'm here to
self-worth.
tell you that is a lie from the pit of hell. Like you deserve better, and you can do better, because you'll have some people where, like, I had a coworker years ago. She continued to stay in this one-sided maladaptive relationship, and in her mind, one of the things that her boyfriend had told her was ain't nobody gonna want you with all them kids.
Mm-hmm.
So in her mind, because they had, I believe, four kids, they had four young girls,
Ooh.
and so when she had just had enough, because I've shared this story on here before. They were
Mm-hmm.
moving, and he was a bare minimum boy. Didn't do nothing, didn't work. She worked 3 jobs to take care of all of them, while he sat at the house and didn't do anything, couldn't be bothered. And so, when it came time for them to move, he wasn't really trying to help them move. And so she comes to me and says, "Hey, will you will you help me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I bet." She's like, "Well, how much are you going to charge?" I was like, "I'll help you move for a bag of M&Ms."
This
I'm
is where
probably,
I said he got himself in trouble, folks. Listen to the story. That's right.
so, I help her move. And so the boyfriend then gets mad. He gets mad, and he's all in his feelings about it. And like I had to tell her, "You tell him to stay his ass in that house, because he come out here, I'm a dog walk him all through these projects. He gonna catch the case of the beats." But so they broke up or whatever, and so he tells her, "You ain't going nowhere." She's like, "How you figure I'm not going nowhere?" And he said, "Because ain't nobody gonna want you with all them kids." And so in her mind, she took that as, I can't do better. I'm
Right.
not gonna be able to find better. I'm stuck here. That's how she took it. And so you will have where people will do that, where they will, in their minds, based off of what someone else has said to them, or what they've heard, or what they've even manufactured in their own minds, that they lock themselves into a relationship that does not benefit them or is not growth filled.
And we were talking about certain things becoming habit, right? Even when it's uncomfortable, right? It starts to become comfortable because it's the only thing you know, and it's what you're used to. And our brain remembers patterns, right?
Yep.
The brain is so fragile. So when the pattern gets disrupted, your brain is telling you, "Uh-oh, something's wrong." Well, if the pattern that I'm used to, or my brain is used to, and is an abusive pattern, right? Then I'm actually going to think this is normal, right? And when it doesn't happen, I meet someone who's not abusive, my brain will tell me, "Hey, you need to be worried about this person because this person's not abusive. This person, uh, they must be up to something because they're not talking to me like the way my partner or my family talks to me, right? It'll be strange for you. And I forgot there's a a therapeutic name for that. But regardless, it's because that person is used to the dysfunctionality or toxicity. They're used to that. So when they see something that's not toxic, they don't know what to do.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
wish Unique was here, but I'm a jump in for her. A lot of this is all about boundaries, right?
Hmm. Boundaries.
It's the first thing you should work on. When you decide to go to a therapist, or your therapist should work on it with you. When you go into therapy, we need to examine your level of healthy boundaries. Because if you have an inability, right, to set healthy boundaries, I was just telling a friend that, all right, usually you're going to put yourself in some very, very negative situations, some dangerous situations, or you're going to put yourself in situations where because you're not governing yourself, you don't have any boundaries, you get yourself in trouble, right? Regardless, you might be the person who's the real predator in the situation, right? And boundaries work both ways, right? Uh, I did a mindful minute on this. Saying no, it's okay to say no. To when you start seeing the behavior, I'm talking about early on in a relationship, you start seeing the behavior, right? You're allowed to say no. That's not acceptable. I'm not going to do that, and it's okay for you to say, hey, you know what? This might be something you do, but this isn't something that I do. And I'm probably not going to be able to have a relationship if this is something you continue to do with me, right? Simple. It doesn't have to be a fight, doesn't have to be an argument. People hear the word no and there's a negative connotation behind it. But if you go to a restaurant, right, and you don't like ketchup, you like barbecue sauce, or you like mustard, and the people ask you what you want on your burger, right, you're quick to say no. I
Yeah.
don't want that.
No pickles and no onions.
No pickles and no onions, right? It's the same thing in a relationship, right? No, I don't like when people talk to me that way. No, I'm sorry. I won't do that. That's something I find illegal.
Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine, for those of you who are tax experts, right? Uh, there's a point in time where people will claim non-exempt to taxes. And you can do that, right, for a certain amount of time of the year so you can get your whole paycheck. Notice you didn't learn this from me. This is a hustle, folks. Please don't do this.
It's a hustle.
This is a hustle. So a good friend of mine, he says, well, his wife came up with the concept. They were trying to save money. They were trying to save money for something they needed to buy or purchase, right? So they were like, look, we're going to claim non-exempt just for the first 6 months of the year. Then we're going to stop, and we're going to make sure that we claim zero or something like that for the next 6 months, so it'll even out, right? People have this little scam they do. Let me tell you, do not ever scam the IRS, right? Not smart. Well, they did this for like 2 years so they could stack money and do some stuff because they were trying to get a house or something like that. Do you know they ended up owing thousands of dollars?
Bro, it ain't worth
Thousands
it.
of dollars.
It ain't worth it.
And well, this is where we're coming into some boundaries, and this is where we're coming into it's okay to say no. He said my first thought was to say no.
Oh
That
my
was his
gosh.
first thought. And he pushed it aside and he went with something that he knew was not right. It was
Huh?
dishonest, right? So part of his morals, his values, his convictions, it was going directly against it, but he sacrificed, all right, his own feelings because he didn't want to upset her.
Absolutely not.
I'm not gonna. I ain't want to get into it with her, whatever. Well, if I can't say no to you, that's a toxic relationship because I'm fearful that you're gonna leave me if I say no to something. That's where we're talking about that level of toxicity where people they want to throw labels on everything, right? No, label that where you walking around on eggshells around
Well,
somebody.
I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because especially the boundary piece, right? The reason I'm glad you brought that up is because, as we've said on here plenty of times, you teach people how to treat you.
Right.
So when you set those clear boundaries of what you're going for, what you're not going for, people know what to even step to you with and what not to step to you with. They
Right.
learn what to keep to themselves and what you're and what they can, in a respectful way engage you with. Too
Hmm.
often we have loose boundaries. And by having loose boundaries turn into no
No
boundaries.
boundaries.
And no boundaries turn into people treating you and talking to you any kind of way because you have not set that boundary of, I'm not going for that. But another point that you made was what we've seen. Too often, we carry on in the ways that we've seen our parents carry on.
Hmm.
Because this is how I dated a young lady, right, where we would get into it, and because my parents never argued in front of me. I never saw them, like, I'm pretty sure they argued, but they never argued in front of me. And the reason, like, I asked both my dad and my mom about that, and their response was, we made a conscious decision to never argue in front of you guys because at the end of the day, you guys as children needed to stay in a child's place.
Right.
By arguing in front of you, we're teaching you negative and maladaptive things, number one. And then number two, we're forcing you to pick a side.
Hmm.
That's not your place as a child.
Right.
Your place as a child is to be a child, not to be in grown folks' business. And
Well,
that was
it
correct.
forces the child to grow up.
Exactly.
You got to make
And
adult decisions.
and so at that point, I'm fast forward to me being an adult. I'm in a relationship with this young lady, and we would disagree, and she would just blow up. I'm talking about like blow up,
Right.
holler, scream, cursing me, getting all up in my face. And I had
Hmm.
never seen that before. And never seeing that before, I'm like, what the hell are we doing right now? Like, my first response would be like, bro, like, what are you yelling for? Not what she was saying, just why are you yelling? Because I'd never experienced that before.
She
And
said, "My
so
parents never did this in front of me. I don't know what to do.
I didn't know what was going on. And
I don't know
so,
what to do."
long story short, I happened to be, we were at a family gathering, and her dad and her mom got into it. And her mom exploded on her dad the same way she exploded on me. And
Right.
so she felt some kind of way because, her mother was being disrespectful to her father. But like I had to explain to her, my guy, you talk to me like that.
Hmm.
That's how you've spoken to me. And she was like,
Right.
no, it's not. I said, yes, it is. I said, even the way that, she was moving her hand, you do the same thing. And so, like, we had to have that conversation where, she came to realize, like, you know what, you're right. Because I grew up seeing my mom act like that. I thought that that's how, you want to make sure that you're
That
being
was
heard
normal
in the
behavior.
conversation. You start
Right.
to think that that's normal behavior. The things that we are exposed to become normalized for us. They become regular patterns of behavior because it's what I know, it's what I've seen. And that's where, for us, when we get into relationships, and, we all learn this lesson when we were children: treat people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
When you are engaging or you are in a relationship with someone, always stop and think before you do anything. How would I feel if the person did this to me?
Hmm.
By stopping and thinking about how you would feel if someone said this or did this to you, a lot of times you will avoid saying or doing things that can be either taken out of context or taken in offense. And
Right.
so for a lot of us, we tend to operate in spaces where we have not learned the proper way to engage with other individuals. And because
Right.
we've never learned how to properly engage with other individuals, we tend to act the way that we know.
Mm.
What's normal for me. So what's normal for me is when I get into it with someone is to just holler, scream, be cussing, and calling somebody outside their name, and in some cases putting hands on the other person.
Right. Right.
Whereas, how does that, and what I always go to is, how did that help the situation?
Well, look, what you just spoke to is so funny because it brings me back to my time working inpatient, and you talk to some people and they avoid confrontation, right? And of course, automatic, you think, well, they're avoiding confrontation because they're scared, right? No, I had a person he was avoiding confrontation because he didn't know the art of communication, like RJ just said, right? He didn't understand that there had to be an active listener, right? He didn't understand that there had to be someone who receives and you allow the person to finish talking. He didn't understand those rules of engagement, right? When it
Absolutely.
came to communication. Had no clue, right? So he said, when I finally got, because look, I came in the aftermath. He said, once the person started talking to him, right? The person was using a lot of hand gestures. He said, where I'm from, I figured he was about to place his hands on me. So immediately he got in a fighting stance and he was ready to throw. And things got heated and they ended up tussling. And he said, that's the reason why I don't talk too much. So I had to break that down. I was like, unpack that. He's like, because usually the way he grew up, when I saw people get into an exchange, it was never a reasonable confrontation. It was never an assertive means of communication. Hey, I'm going to need you to do this or that. It always ended up in some sort of fight.
Yeah.
So he anticipated. So he told me, he said he just never wanted to talk to people. He said, like, man, because that's anytime I saw people talking about something, especially if it was important, it ended up in fisticuffs or it ended up in somebody getting hurt or dead. And so he said, I refuse to talk sometimes, right? Because he said, I'm not, trying to get in a situation. So his first instincts when this guy was upset at him was, hey, it's time to fight. They could not, in his brain, he said, I couldn't see this as a reasonable or rational conversation that was going to end well. All right. And there's people like that. So when you're in a relationship with somebody and you're noticing they don't understand how to communicate their feelings effectively without arguing, without fighting, that should show you something. That means they probably have an inability to do that. Right. And so you two are not going to get far if you can't have a proper conversation that doesn't end up in a fight. That's toxic.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like just breaking free from the toxic relationships, I think that for a lot of people, you have to acknowledge that toxicity. You have to acknowledge the toxicity that you find yourself in, and you have to start prioritizing your well-being. I was just having this. I was having like on one of the mindfulness minutes. Somebody commented about it, and we were kind of discussing it in the comments. But you have to prioritize your well-being, and I think that for a lot of us, we don't prioritize our own well-being. Right. I'm sorry, anything that costs me my peace is too expensive. It's outside my budget. It's outside my price range. I will not be purchasing it. Something that you alluded to earlier was setting firm boundaries. I'm not, these certain things I'm not going for. I'm not going for the calling me out my name. I'm not going for you yelling and screaming in my face. I'm not going for certain things. Another one is seeking support from trusted friends, families, and most importantly, from professionals. I'm of the mindset of more so leaning towards the professional piece. For a lot of us, we want to include everybody and their mama in our business. And the problem with including everybody in your mama in your business is not everyone gives good advice. Right. Everyone, advice is like a booty hole. Everyone's got one.
Everybody got it.
Everyone's got one. And so some people's advice is to stick and stay. I've seen that where people have been in abusive relationships and, well, that's your wife. And that's the mother of your kids. Right. That's your husband. And that's the father of your kids. And you need to stay and work it out. And the Lord says this and the Lord says that. I'm sorry. But when we get to the point to where there's certain lines that are crossed, like we get to the point to where certain lines that are crossed, and when certain lines are crossed, it's best that we part amicably and peacefully before either one of us ends up in jail or one of us ends up in the ground.
Right.
So that's where, for me, we all have friends, we all have family members that we talk about our issues with and we talk about our problems with, but you should be seeking the help of a professional, keyword professional. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because that professional is giving you a non-biased, answer to your questions. A professional is trained to help guide you through and help you unpack your problems and the issues that you are dealing with. Whereas a friend or a family member, they have a side that they picked.
Right.
They know you or they know the other person or they know the other people. So because of the relationship, there's going to be a bias that's provided.
Right.
And then based off of what you're saying, because again, there's always three sides to every story. There's your side, the other person's side, and then there's the truth. Most people are never going to say, hey, it was me. I was
Right.
the one that was toxic. I was the one that was the problem. I was the one that was being disrespectful. Most people are not going to do that. They're not going to volunteer and say, it was me. Right. Most people, we're just not going to do that. And
that's what I was saying earlier. When you see your partner refusing to take blame and then putting the blame on you all the time, that's toxic.
Yes. But sometimes, again, like for me, and I've had this conversation with people as well. Sometimes, like whenever I have a conversation with somebody, especially if it's something that is something serious, especially if it's something serious or something where, there was coarse words that were shared, I will sit down and reflect on the conversation. And the reason I sit down and reflect on the conversation is because sometimes I need to know if I was tripping or if the other person may have been tripping, and sometimes even though I was right, I was tripping in the way that I spoke to the other person. So for me, I'm mature enough and, mentally and emotionally grounded enough to be able to go back to that person and man up and say, hey, I shouldn't have said or I shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. A lot of times we sometimes need to do that, and that's where, when we're out here just labeling everything toxic, it may not necessarily always be the other person. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes you are tripping. The same way that you have the right to communicate your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions, and things that are important to you, the other person should be able to do the same thing.
Right.
And the same way that if you'd want them to receive what you have to say, you should be willing to receive what they have to say. That's what makes a relationship healthy, is there's an even exchange of ideas and feelings and opinions. It shouldn't be one person's feelings and opinions are weighted and have higher value than the other person's, because that's not a healthy relationship.
Right. And look, you shouldn't feel as if, hey, if I say something, then there's going to be retaliation, right?
Or it's going to be a problem.
It's going to be a problem, right? If I don't agree with this person, that's why I was talking about that level of differentiation, right? Like, I don't always feel like how my partner feels. It's not, I mean, come on, we're not going to see eye to eye on everything, right? But I'm supportive and I encourage you. But I shouldn't be afraid to say that doesn't sound right.
Yes.
Right? I shouldn't be afraid to tell you my opinion, because then I'm thinking, oh, retaliation. If I tell this person this and that, like that's like a hostile work environment, right?
Yeah. You surviving day to day.
Yeah, right. People look, I should be able to tell my partner, my spouse, my friends, my family members. That's when we talk about boundaries, just something real. I should be able to say that doesn't sound right, right? That makes me uncomfortable. Or, you know what? I don't know if this is something you might want to do, but I probably don't want to invest my money in this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you should be able to do that without expecting retaliation.
Or expecting someone to be in their feelings about it.
It'd be in their feelings. Now I can't go around you no more because you walk around and your face twisted up, right? That's the difference. When we talk about toxic relationship and we talk about healthy relationship, a healthy relationship, you should be able to express what you don't like, what you do like, and vice versa. Like RJ was saying, they should be able to communicate what they're feeling, and I should be able to communicate what I'm feeling without us coming to fisticuffs. Like I said about that young man I was talking to, he said, well, I don't talk. Basically, he grew up saying, if we get to talking, that means we fighting.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to express his emotions. There's a lot of people like that out there.
A lot of people.
They say, hey, I don't do too much talking, because usually if I got to talk, that means there's something wrong. That's not life.
It's not a healthy, well, it's life. It's not a healthy way to live life.
Right. Because I have to be able to communicate.
Yeah, because it gets draining arguing, fighting with somebody all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about it though is, like I said before, for a lot of us, and this is where we get it twisted, right? Some people may not be aware that they're doing something. Mm-hmm. Just like prime example, you're in someone's car. You're in somebody's car, and to them, it's not cold in the car. To you, it is.
They got the AC
They got the
blast.
AC blasting. Like for me,
I can't stand
I like it cold. I like it cold. I keep it on 64 in my house, pretty much the entire year that it's warm. I like it cold in my house. To other people,
Look,
that's too
I'm
cold.
talking about. I'm not talking about during the summertime. I know folks that do that during the winter. They got the thing on 79 during. I mean 69 during the winter. You
I mean,
say,
that's me too. I like it cold.
goodness. Well,
So
I can't sleep over your joint.
for me, if you are if I may not recognize that I'm freezing you out because this is what I'm used to.
Right, right.
You have to let me know because a closed mouth is not going to get fed.
I got to communicate that.
You have to effectively communicate with me that I am making you feel some type of way or I'm doing something to you. I will not know because I cannot read your mind, even as a provider. Yes, we treat your mind, but I cannot read it. And that's where, as I said before, it is on you as the person who is feeling some type of way that your boundary is being buffeted by whatever this person is saying or doing. It is on you
Right,
to communicate that in a healthy and a respectful way in which the person can receive it. Because the mistake that most of us make when we are communicating with other people is we are communicating in a way that the other person cannot receive it. When what
right,
you are saying or what you are trying to communicate is being distracted from by how you were saying it or how you were communicating it to the other person, you've already lost them as a listener.
mm-hmm.
I can't yell and scream at somebody and expect somebody to receive that because ain't nobody receiving that. They're more focused on the fact that you're yelling and screaming at them than than the actual content of your message. And
They
that's
missed it.
where we have to sit down and we have to practice and work at being effective communicators with each other. We have to be able to convey thoughts, feelings, opinions in a healthy way in which the other person or other persons are able to receive it. And
Right,
when you recognize that the other person is not willing, because there's a difference between them not being willing to receive versus not hearing you. Again, there's a difference between listening and hearing. When a person is hearing you, they're taking in what you're saying and they're looking at ways in which they can apply it. Some
right,
people will choose to, mute you. The
right.
same way I
Block
can
you out.
mute a phone call or mute a video, some people will choose to mute you and they will ignore you. There's a
Right.
difference between them choosing to not hear you versus a person not being able to hear you. And
Right.
so we as the persons have to learn how to communicate in an effective way so that we are heard. And when we are heard, we are being valued. Now you can tell when you communicate with someone and they hear you versus when they don't hear you.
Mm-hmm.
When a person hears you, they will start making incremental changes almost immediately. May
Right.
not be overnight, may not be the next day, but there will be small incremental changes that they will make in order to address what you brought up to them. Versus
Right.
when a person is just, as Khalil alluded to in our episode about getting married, some people will yes ma'am you and yes
Yeah.
sir you just to get you to shut the hell up and get out their face. But then
Mm-hmm.
they will make no changes, no adaptations, no corrections. That person is just, as we've alluded to at times before on this podcast, that person's playing in your face.
Yeah.
And that's when a person shows you who they are, believe them. Now, again, you got to give people, I do believe in giving people grace and mercy. I do believe in giving a person an opportunity to correct the behavior. I don't believe in just throwing somebody out like trash, the moment they do something you're not pleased with. I do believe that, in a relationship, because again, when you look at marriages that have lasted the test of, against the test of time, that's because they learned how to work through their problems. Now, some people chose to stick and stay, whereas other people chose to be mature and let's work our problems out. Let's unpack our problems. Let's address our problems. And the
Let's
reason,
communicate.
let's
Let's
communicate.
communicate.
And the reason that I am a big proponent of communication is because, again, we as human beings, we are creatures that base a large part of our lives on communication. A lot of how we interact with the world is through communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's why phones are such a big thing. Because again, it's a device that allows me to communicate with people across the world. So for a lot of us, we prioritize the wrong things. And because we prioritize the wrong things, that's why our relationships end up in the state that they end up in. And so I'm sorry, when it comes to a healthy relationship versus a toxic relationship, I don't care how bad you are, I don't care how fine you is, I don't care how beautiful you are, how well you speak, how well you dress. If we cannot, and this is a deal breaker for me, if we cannot sit down and be able to communicate effectively with one another respectfully,
Right.
we got to part ways. That because I already know, just based off of how we, because and I talked about this in the episode about getting married. Conflict resolution.
Yes.
Conflict resolution, because there's going to be some conflict at some point in time. And how you, as a term from my alternative life, is react to contact. How you react to contact is going to dictate how if this relationship is worth staying in or getting out of. Because there's going to be times where we disagree. There's going to be times where,
Right.
we're not on the same
Natural.
page. There's going to be times where we're going to have arguments, or we're not going to see eye to eye. How we deal with that is going to dictate if this is going to go in a healthy direction, or if it's going to go in an unhealthy direction. And when you sit down and you're able to unpack that and you're able to address that, and the person is not willing to grow, that person is not willing to be better, because when you know better, when you know better, the expectation is you will be better.
Mm-hmm.
When the person is making an active decision to not be better, that's when it's time to move on. I just did a mindfulness minute about that last week. That's when it's time to move on. When the person is showing you that who they are is who they are, they ain't gonna be no different than this. It's time to move on. If this is not going to be a situation that is going to be growth filled and healthy for you to be the best version of yourself.
Well, the patterns, right?
Yeah.
We're human beings. Remember I said the brain recognizes patterns.
Absolutely.
You've already seen this person's pattern. You've already seen that, hey, they don't communicate the right way. The behavior might not be the right way. How they treat you might not be the right way. How they treat your kids might not be the right way. You're already seeing the pattern, right? So once I see the pattern and I tell you, hey, I don't like this pattern of behavior, you communicate that in a healthy way, not cussing someone out. Don't you ever do that again. No, we're talking about a healthy pattern of communication where you sat down, you said, hey, this doesn't work for me, right? And I noticed this is something that happens often. I don't want to be in a relationship where this is happening. Once you communicate that, and that person was an active listener, all right, and they were able to receive what you said and verbally, all right, repeat it back to you. You don't like, so what you're saying is you don't like when I do such and such. Once you've done that and you know they heard you and they still do it again, that's when you know they're probably not going to change. And we have to be attentive to that. You got to be attentive. All right, I see that. All right, this isn't going where I thought it was going to go. This hasn't gotten better, right? And be attuned to your own feelings, folks, right? Like, I've got to know that this is making me feel uncomfortable, right? Like, and this is happening over and over again. I've got to be able to say my feelings are valid.
Absolutely.
There's people who walk around so uncomfortable. I mean, all right, we've seen it. And all of a sudden, it's like my feelings must be lying to me. But you're feeling like this every single day. This is an uncomfortable relationship. Things are not going well. It's going to come to a head, right? We can't keep suppressing. It's going to come to a head. So that's when we have to make our move, right? If the person's unwilling, and I know some people, my homeboy always says this to me. He said, well, Khalil, some people are unwilling to be alone. They don't want to be alone, man. They'll take anything. They'll take any type of attention. They just don't want to be alone. And I'm not going to sacrifice who I am, right? My morals, my convictions, my values, right? I don't want to do that just because to say I have somebody. No, I really need to be in tune with myself and how I'm functioning as a human being. Because if I'm depressed all the time, right? If I'm anxious all the time, if I'm emotionally disturbed all the time, you're not going to get the best version of Khalil.
Absolutely. I think that it's important that once you have, made your way, because you like I said before, anything that is going to cost you your peace of mind is too expensive. And I feel like
Right.
once you have, you put it back on the shelf and you're moving on with your life, it's time to heal and move forward. It's time to heal and move forward. And that rebuilding process has to look like you recognizing your own self-worth, reestablishing your confidence. That's where, as I said before, sitting down with a professional as a provider, sitting down with a therapist, being able to unpack where things went wrong, what you can do better, and how you can not find yourself in the same situations. Because again, what we tend to do is, and I had this conversation with Unique a little while back. We all have a type. Anybody who says they don't have a type is lying. Right. We all have a type. If you keep finding yourself in certain situations over and over and over and over and over again with different people, we have to start reevaluating, looking at finding a different type. Because it stops being the other person's fault when you keep finding yourself in the same situations.
Right.
You can't always say, oh, the other person was toxic. No, you like toxic behaviors. You're attracted to that. You're attracted to conflict. You're comfortable with chaos and calamity. Mm-hmm. And so because you're comfortable with it, you keep finding yourselves being drawn to certain people who bring that to you. You like having that in your circumference. But once you get to a point to where you are able to engage in the world in a healthy way, you don't want chaos and calamity around you. You want peace. Yeah, I can tell you that for a mature, healthy man, there's 3 things that are important to a mature, healthy man: loyalty, respect, and peace of mind. Anything that is constantly disrupting my peace, I don't need it.
I don't want it.
Anything that is disrupting my peace of mind, I don't need it. And anything or anybody that is disloyal, I don't need them. You have to outline for you non-negotiables. Your peace of mind needs to be a non-negotiable. Who you are and, being poured into and being fulfilled and being satiated, being edified needs to be a non-negotiable. When you are allowing your self-worth to be predicated on what other people think about you, what other people believe about you, what other people feel about you, there's some work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And with that work needing to be done, you don't need to be, engaging and entangling with anybody. Because again, when you are not operating as yourself, you are not operating as the healthiest version of yourself, you are doing a disservice to not only yourself, but anybody you are engaging with. Because by you not being the best version of yourself, how can you give them the best version of yourself? Mm-hmm. And too often we don't realize when we're engaging with other people, we're entangling with other people, where, for the grown-ups in the audience, hunching with other people, laying up with other people,
right?
We don't recognize that we're not whole and we're not healthy. And so hurt people end up hurting people. You go from being the hurter you go from being the hurted to being the hurter, because you are not operating in the best space. And so a lot of times when you don't unpack things and you don't process things, you don't address things, those things come addressing you. And so you will find,
you bring it into the next relationship.
That's boy, I tell you, man, I tell you, so many people I have seen, so many clients, and even people I've been in relationship with. Like, I've had to tell people, listen, I can't pay for a meal I didn't eat. I cannot. I will not. I didn't do those things to you, because you'll start, well, my last boyfriend, they ain't got nothing to do with me.
Right.
Oh, dude, they had nothing to do with me. That guy and this guy, we're 2 different people.
2 different people.
So whatever happened with him, you need to address that with him. Like, I dated a young lady. She had this thing, with, it was just weird. But, where, well, this person did this to me, ma'am, stop. I didn't do those things. Because I didn't do those things, I'm not paying for the crimes of the man of the past. Mm-hmm. Like, if you didn't lock them up, you're not going to then push that onto me. Because it was like, she got mad one day because she had an accent. There were certain words that she would say, and like, I pointed it out. I'm like, like we were on the phone and she was talking about pies. So the way she said pies was pies. And so, I made a joke about that, and she, oh yeah, I feel some kind of way because, my past relationships, men would talk about how I talk. And I'm like, I didn't do that though. I pointed out one thing. I'm not making fun of how you talk. I just never heard anybody say it like that before. And, we had like a 10-minute conversation about that. Like, I had to explain to her, like, listen, I can't pay for a meal I didn't eat. Whatever they did to you, I didn't do that to you. So you can't lump me in with them, because we're not the same man. We're not we just can't do that. And so
Right.
for a lot of times, like I said, we will operate as not the best version of ourselves in relationships, and then find ourselves in the same type of situations over and over and over again. And at some point in
And then
time,
continues.
we have to, that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. If you are trying to have things you've never had before, you got to be willing to do things you've never done before. And
Well,
so sometimes when you
be
keep,
willing to change your type.
yeah,
Be
you have to
willing
be,
to change your type. Sometimes you got to step out, man. You know, if I were to keep my same type, right? I you know, in my 20s,
there's a reason that you're not with that person now.
right? Running
So
around people, yeah. You
so
come on now.
you know, so if and we need to shoot an episode about that. But
Right.
there's a reason you're not with that person right now. So clearly that type does not suit you.
Suit you.
Too often we will get in these relationships with people not understanding that you got what you paid for.
Mm-hmm.
So you will say, I want me a baddie, not really understanding what comes along with being with the baddie. Or you want a hood dude, but then you don't understand what comes along with being with the hood dude.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's no different than that Destiny's Child song, the Soldier song with T.I., Lil Wayne on it. You saying that you want a soldier, not really understanding what that means. Because you ain't talking about like a military soldier. You're talking about a street soldier. So you talking about, so there's consequences that, as we see now, everybody catching these RICO cases, everybody getting locked up, everybody going to jail, everybody dying. That's what comes along with being with a street soldier. So when we're saying that we want these types of relationships, there's certain things that come along. There's an assumed risk. There's, you know, and there's the fine print on the buyer's agreement that comes along with having that type of relationship. So we have to, as Khalil was alluding to, you have to relook at changing up your type. If the relationships always ended badly, the relationships always ended negatively, the relationship was not growth filled, it was not, you know, filled with someone pouring into me, someone pushing me to be better, someone helping me to be better, someone guiding me to be better. It might be time to look at, you know, instead of looking at the soldier, looking at the dude with the glasses,
right?
Looking at the dude that works a 9 to 5, looking at the guy that might be
dude,
that might be a square.
weird.
You know, we might, you know, or I mean, and that's what I'm saying. We might need to change up our types, because it goes back to what I said earlier. It may not be what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear. And so for some of us who keep finding ourselves in toxic relationships, we have to learn, because as you alluded to in the previous episode, at some point in time, if you're not choosing better, you're choosing the life that you currently find yourself in. So we have to rebuild, retool, recenter ourselves, establish our confidence, establish our positive self-worth, recognize the red flags that pop up in our future or current relationships, and learn from past mistakes. Because if you're not learning from your past, this is why for me, I'm a huge history nerd. I'm an animal nerd and I'm a huge history nerd. The reason I'm a huge history nerd is because if you do not learn from your past and from the history, you will see it pop up again in your present and in your future.
Bound to repeat it.
And so for a lot of us being in these relationships, you know, as we alluded to in the marriage episode, we want to get to certain phases of the operation. So we will fast forward and speed through certain parts of the timeline in order to get to certain phases.
Yeah, you want to get to the end.
You want to get to the laying up. That's what we want to do. We want to get to the laying up. We want to get to doing that, instead of sitting down, taking the time to learn the other person and figure out, do I fit or do they fit in my life?
Right.
And that's where, again, like when we get in these relationships, we talk about being in toxic relationships. A lot of times we have to do some assessing on our end. We have to realize that there were some things that I came into this relationship with that I didn't resolve. Right. There were certain things that I came into this relationship that I didn't address. So it may not be the other person is being toxic. It may be that I'm having an adverse reaction to what they're saying based off of some things that are going on with me, because sometimes it's not external, sometimes it's internal,
right?
And like I said, you know, I dated this one young lady, and we're having an argument. She was shocked that I sat there for 45 minutes and just let her talk, because she was so used to arguing that, well, you ain't gonna say nothing. I was like, no, I'm letting you talk. Well, why you ain't saying nothing? Because that's not how a conversation
That's not
works.
how a conversation works. Right.
Beloved, that's not how a conversation works.
Beloved.
We
Notice
can't.
black people call you beloved when they want to say stupid. That's not how that works.
That's not. Yes and no, but she was shocked by the fact that I sat there for 45 minutes and I just let her go, and I wasn't. We're not yelling. We're not screaming. I just let her go, and the reason I explained to her, we both can't talk at the same time, because if we're both talking at the same time, nobody's receiving anything.
Right.
It's no different than when both people are just sitting there and no one's saying anything. How awkward that gets. And that's where, again, like when we start looking at, relationships as a whole, we have to recognize that certain patterns of behavior may not necessarily, that certain patterns of behavior are learned. Certain patterns of behavior have been, it's what we've experienced. And that's where we have to sit down and take the time to work with a professional and learn better patterns of behavior, unlearn certain things, relearn certain things, reframe them in the proper context, because context matters.
It does.
Just like I alluded to earlier at the beginning part of this episode, words have meaning and words have power. Context has power, context has meaning. So context to a situation gives, a deeper understanding as to why certain things happen. If I walked up and just slapped you in the face, you're gonna, for no apparent reason, you're gonna want to know why I did that.
Right.
You're shocked at the fact that I hit you, but you want to know why I did that. So for a lot of us, when we talk about toxic relationships, we have to sometimes realize that the other person may be doing the things that they're doing because it's what they know. And that's where, like I said, sitting down, having that conversation, setting that boundaries from the very beginning. People will, because you ultimately teach people how to treat you.
Yep.
And so people will know not to even step to you with that baby back bullshit, because they know you're not going for it, versus, I know I can come and jump in their face. I can do this, I can do that. And they ain't going to do nothing. Because you teach people what you're going for. You teach people what you're not going for. And that's where it's very important that you learn, first and foremost, learn to love yourself. Learn to love yourself. And that way you can teach people how to love you appropriately. You can teach people how to engage with you appropriately. You can teach people how to communicate with you appropriately. Because if you don't know how to do those things for yourself, how can you teach someone else? Right. How can you show someone else? Hell, in conversely, how can you do that for them?
Exactly.
And that's where, for a lot of us, like I said, we see in today's culture where the loving is putting hands on each other. The loving is cussing you out. The loving is loving you, your homegirl, the girl down the street, the girl around the corner, because now we done got all these kids in multiple houses. That's not respect. That's not healthy. That's not love. Or keying someone's car, or like I was at the mall the other day, somebody spray painted all over somebody's car. Who does that?
Well, somebody who was angry. What you mean? People? Hey, but RJ just talked about something that, I know we're running out of time here, and I want to talk about the self-love aspect, right? And that self-respect aspect. Everything that he just mentioned, right? That would keep you from being in a toxic relationship.
Absolutely.
If you're not loving yourself, not setting healthy boundaries, right? Not taking care of your own personal finances, right? You won't be in a situation, right? It's so funny because living with other people in my life, especially in my 20s, and getting to see, hey, people do not care if you spend all your time investing in them.
Absolutely
right?
not.
Most people aren't going to complain. But how about you invest in yourself? Especially before you get into a relationship with somebody. Spend that time investing in yourself, getting your mental health correct, getting your physical health correct. Learn how to take care of yourself spiritually. Get that connection.
Praying.
And then we worry about trying to find you the proper mate, partner, whatever that is. Learn to love yourself.
So we are going to end the conversation there. This is Try Not to Overthink It signing out. I'm RJ.
And I'm Khalil.
If you like what you heard, you like what you saw, we ask that you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button. Make sure you hit it. And because you do not want to miss out on the conversations that we have on here, because we are some pretty very, very educated and very witty people. If you would prefer to listen to the episode instead of watch it, I don't know why you would, because we're some very good looking people. My mommy and daddy made this. They did a good job. They did a good job of making this. If you would prefer to listen to us, we can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Audible, pretty much anywhere you can get your audio files. We can be located. If you would like to support us even more, we ask that you would like and follow us on Instagram as well as TikTok. The links will be down in the description. We drop content on there every day. But this is us signing out, and we will catch you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.